Okay, now Alessandro wants to make one additional remark about Milei, and then you can shoot.
Very quick. One thing maybe we forgot, and which is worth mentioning, is Milei said time and again, we will pay off the Argentinian public debt because this is a matter of honoring contracts. And so this is a libertarian policy because we need to honor the contracts we signed. And this is exactly the opposite of what Rothbard said. Rothbard wrote an article about repudiating the public debt. And the main rationale for repudiating the public debt is exactly the point that Milei makes. He says, otherwise they won't lend us money anymore. And this is exactly the point. The governments should not get money as a lease because they abuse of money and make wars and so on. So the right libertarian policy should be of not paying the public debt. And then you have the question, okay, but then lots of people will take huge losses. Too bad, I would say. Most of these people are banks anyways, or banksters maybe we should say. And the ones, anyway, if you buy public debt, I hope that you didn't, you participate in crime because you're buying basically shares of future fiscal loot of the tax robbery, and so it is an immoral activity from a libertarian point of view, both to engage in public debt for a government and both for you to buy public government. You just participate in this scheme. So this is another thing where Milei said something which is completely at odds with any libertarian idea and policy.
Okay, now, please.
My question was, one of the points Fusillo made, I found very, very important, that Milei kind of sets a precedent for other people, like an example of how political oligarchs, and well, Jewish oligarchs particularly, can use libertarianism to bring further other un-libertarian goals, like with a libertarian brand attached to them. And I was thinking also about this, what you mentioned about Palantir, that shouldn't like Milei help us see that also people like Peter Thiel, and to a lesser degree because it's difficult to understand what he writes about, Curtis Yarvin, are kind of trying to use the brand of libertarianism, and particularly Professor Hoppe's work on democracy, to like justify a sort of technocratic overtake of American and I don't know, other countries possibly. Fusillo mentioned also afterwards maybe Russia or other countries. So yeah, it's for the panel mostly.
I'm sure that Milei will hire Palantir. Palantir probably has already contracts with the Argentinian government, and that is an organization that collects data on everybody and everything that takes place. I seem to remember at the beginning Thiel claimed that allows us to predict evil things from happening, to speak. That would be to put the best face on an institution such as that. I should also mention that the head of Palantir, I forgot the name, Karp, yeah. Karp is of course an ardent Zionist. So it will be put to good uses in a way that we would not consider to be good uses. And I'm sure that Milei will also put it to good use. Yeah.
Maybe I add just a note. I think Professor Hoppe's book about democracy is the most misunderstood book of history. I'm happy it came out again in an Italian translation a few months ago with my foreword. And because I often heard people, yeah, Hoppe, this is the guy who said that he's a monarchist, he prefers kings. And of course, in the first part, you have an argumentation that says that kings are less prone to destroy capital. So they are, in a way, better than the presidents who just destroy the capital of the country. And it's a typical example of the tragedy of the commons. But you should read the whole book and then arrive to the end, and where, of course, the proposal is we should pursue secession. And so the creation of the smallest possible political unities. This is the conclusion of the book. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is lost on the people who just read maybe the first 30 pages, as it happens usually. Yeah, okay, I know this is the monarchist guy. Hoppe is a new, someone who wants to have the kings back. This is exactly the opposite. It's a way to show how democracies are failed, how democracy is just another word for describing socialism, how it's a way to use social envy to favor a class of parasites who just exploit their country, and the way out should be to downgrade, downscale these enormous entities. That's why, for example, the nation states nowadays are a line of resistance against huge international organizations, which are just a form of cartelization of governments. It's like criminals. The petty criminal then enters a criminal organization. The criminal organizations form cartels, and the same thing happens with states. So the smaller the unity, the better we are off, and the easier we can vote with our feet. So this is the conclusion of the book, and I find it funny that these globalists, technocrats, use Hoppe's books to say, yeah, we are also libertarians, which is, of course, completely false and has nothing to do with the conclusion of the book.
One little anecdote on democracy. My old late friend, Erik von Kühnel-Ledin, his motto was also, against Wilson's idea of we have to make the world safe for democracy, his motto was also we have to make the world safe from democracy. And he said, you should also always emphasize that two of the most important people in the Western world were killed because of democracy. One was Jesus and the other one was Socrates. Both of them were victims of democracy. Democracy killed them. So he was always proud to tell me these sorts of things, and I loved it, I must say.
Thank you. My question is for the panel who wants to answer, but what role do foreign government intelligence services, along with propaganda and cover-up operations, play? What role do they play, like in these shaping these political narratives, and how have like the FBI, Israel, and recent Argentine agencies been involved? Yeah, okay. Like these cover-ups, like how they are like interconnected, you know, with the intelligence services from these governments, like for some operations, for example, in the case of Trump, the Epstein files and stuff like that.
Okay, the true answer is we don't know, and we have no way to know, because we can suspect that the intelligence services are involved, and I think that the substantial part of intelligence activity is devoted to propaganda, to gathering information and spreading information. And but I think this is quite obvious. I think that one of the giant operations which had been going on during the last years, and I think this is, of course, it's speculation, but I think this makes sense. The Epstein Island was a way to set up an enormous operation of blackmail. If you have these people coming to the islands, to the island and performing horrible deeds with minors, with abuse, maybe ritual murder, we don't know what happened there, and at least what the Attorney General Pam Bondi said, it's horrible. We have hours of video footage of horrible crimes which were committed. If you have those videos and if you know who did it, you can blackmail these people. And this could be one of the explanations why suddenly politicians do as they are told and against their election promises, because they are under blackmail. The way to control someone is either to pay him or her, it's easy, so corruption, they can print money, so it's easy, or to threaten them, that's another possibility, if they have children or so, or to blackmail them. And these are the three ways by means of which, especially intelligence services, do their job. And in fact, especially American secret services have a long story of overthrowing governments, starting revolutions, and I think this is quite obvious. But another thing is, you can add, we take secret services for granted. It's, okay, there are secret services. It's like there's the police or the army, but we should say there shouldn't be any secret services. I mentioned it with my talk. Secret services started with the 30 Years' War, where the governments thought it useful to have this network of secret agents. And the most interesting figure is James Bond. James Bond has a license to kill. And so secret service is the idea that there are two morals, one for the common people who cannot kill, and then there's James Bond. He has the license to kill because he serves a higher end, the government, the common good, whatever, the British Empire. And so, but this is the subtle propaganda for a double standard, a double moral standard. There is no double standard. What is forbidden for anyone should be forbidden for James Bond or for any other secret agent. And the fact that they are so fascinating, you remember the beautiful actors performing as James Bond. This shows you have to be accustomed to the idea that it's good that we have these people, because they are not only fascinating and they play in casinos and they speak lots of languages and can perform amazing feats, but it's okay if they can kill someone. Whereas I think
pretty girls.
Yeah, pretty girls, of course. And whereas I think the work of the secret agents is much more bureaucratic, and it's centered on propaganda and on organization of these overthrows of governments and so on. We should claim for no more secret services and no more secrets, because okay, we prefer no states, but if there have to be states, it should be totally transparent. The citizens should know everything and anything, always and anywhere, and this is not like this. We have the redacted documents with black pages, and you don't get to have information because you are not supposed to. So you are as a lower class human being who has no right to have information.
I'll initially ask for a comment from Dr. Gabb, because I appreciate, but open it up to anyone else that would like to comment. I appreciated your statement of the secondary agenda, because we see efforts overtly for reindustrialization, nearshoring, friendshoring, reshoring, and we also see limited degrees of the remoralization that are over, particularly in military recruitment videos that are fashioning more traditional people filling those roles. As previous years, we saw some pretty far out and outlandish recruitment videos. How does that square then with the topic that we barely touched on today, which is incompatible immigration and forced integration? There's a lot of upset going on even as far away as Japan, with difficulties in the situation with immigration policy. So do you anticipate any changes to what we're seeing with immigration patterns and policies?
I do, yes. I would emphasize that power, you can analyze power in highly abstract terms, because power is predictable in its workings. But the way in which power manifests itself in the world is often very messy. And you can change an agenda, but you give that agenda to other people to implement. You may not be entirely sure of the new agenda yourself. The people who are implementing it may not be very intelligent, may not be at all competent, and that is what we're seeing. But some degree of re-homogenization will probably come onto that secondary agenda. Now, of course, how that is to be achieved, I can't begin to say. It may be a process of accelerated integration and assimilation, or it may just result in remigration. I don't know. That is for the authorities to decide. But the fact that the Reform Party in Britain is talking about the repatriation of 600,000 asylum seekers, and that the Conservative Party is now saying, oh, but we'll do many more than that, indicates that agendas are beginning to shift. This would once have been completely off the table. The fact that it is coming onto the table indicates the great changes. Indeed, the reconstruction of Keir Starmer's government earlier this month has brought into government people who do appear to be committed to stopping those refugee boats from crossing the English Channel. So exactly how you unwind a lot of what has happened during the past 50 years, I don't know, but I think they will get round to doing something about it. But there'll be many different attempts. It will proceed by fits and starts. Some of the policies will be crazy and deeply oppressive. Some of them will be rather more sophisticated. These people are not better informed about the world than we are, and they may actually be rather less competent at organizing things. So you can expect to see a great period of turbulence and failed experiments before the new shape of things emerges. But there will be a new shape of things. I am reasonably convinced of that. In the same way, I do believe that the glass doors are opening and Israel is being pushed out. The primary objective, the first agenda, is to re-establish unipolar hegemony. Israel's function in that is to operate as an enforcement agency in the Middle East to make sure that everybody else remains broadly Western. Israel has fallen under the control of a gang of crazies who are live streaming the mass murder of women and children. That is something that is very difficult to justify, very difficult to live with. And so Israel will, as I said earlier, be thrown under the bus. In what way that will happen, I can't say. And when it will happen, I can't say. And whether you see Netanyahu standing before the International Criminal Court charged with crimes against humanity is also something I can't say. But the present wickedness in Gaza will probably not be allowed to go completely unpunished?
Hello. I'll have initially a question for Mr. Ammous, but I'm happy to hear any opinion on that. What would, from your perspective, an ideal solution to the conflict in Israel and Palestine look like? It ideally with a minimal bloodshed and repulsion of people or extermination of people, or just drive them out. So if you try to minimize harm and injustice, what could a solution look like?
Well, for me, we discussed, I explained the problem as being absence of property rights. So the solution would be property rights. For me, I think the conflict would be over if you just had a free market in land, where government just protected the existing property rights order instead of violating it. But that really is the entire raison d'etre of the State of Israel, is to just have a monopoly on that land. So it's extremely unpopular as an idea. But in my opinion, I think the real reason the conflict is so intractable is a lot of other conflicts, you'll see people might lose property and they can then just move on. But the difference is that there, for instance, a lot of Germans lost property in World War II, and they were moved back to Germany. And in Germany, they could buy property and they could live like normal human beings, and they could just continue to own property. But for Palestinians, who are, before the war started, it was approximately about half the population of historical Palestine is not Jewish, between the West Bank and Gaza and inside. So for those people, their property rights are still denied because of their religion. But if property rights were granted for everybody, regardless of their religion or race, then I believe this would take a lot of the problem out of the conflict. Then it would be possible for Palestinians to think of it as being, all right, this happened a long time ago and let's get over it. But if you don't have the ability to own property today, and if you're watching your property being taken away from you every day, you can't get over it. It's not a matter of being stubborn, it's not a matter of being stuck in the past, it's just that this is exactly what's going on. It's a process that's been going on for 80 years. So if that were to change, if the property rights system were to change, then I think that would go a very long way in just removing the nastiness of the radicalism in terms of this clinging to wanting to liberate Palestine, essentially, among the Palestinians. And I think it would become entirely feasible to go back to a system of property rights that is multi-confessional, because that existed in Palestine for 1,300 years. Now, the questions of how you do it, of course, the implementation is the tricky part. However, it's important to note the majority of the Palestinian refugees who left in 1948, most of them left and their villages were destroyed, and then they were expelled, and then the villages were destroyed with bulldozers meant to make sure that nobody could come back. And a lot of these villages are still empty. So there's still a lot of empty space for people to be able to live there and people to be able to return there. And I think you could create some kind of economic system for compensating people who lost land and allowing them the right to buy back the land if they want to. I think with this kind of arrangement, it would be easy to see some kind of shared future. But of course, this is very different from what is currently in charge, and so it doesn't really matter what ultimately we think is fair or correct, because ultimately, currently, the world's only superpower and the world's only money printer are in the hands of people that are convinced that this is the time to kill as much as we can and get as much land as we can and see how much we can get away with for as long as we can.
I'm particularly troubled about Javier Milei. Of course, like if his empire goes down the drain because of unfinished policies or not going all the way with his election promises, which actually might be quite difficult sometimes to fulfill, especially if you're in a real political realm. I'm trying to always look at it a little bit from the side of like real politics, where he still doesn't have the majority in the parliament, and also not everything that he would like to do he can actually do, right? But I'm just thinking how to really help him to mitigate, or how to help us to mitigate the worst possible impact. Should there be more, for example, some sort of maybe petition by Austrian economists trying to give him recommendation how to fix the policies, or how to distance ourselves or libertarians in general from his policies? I'm just wondering what do you think should be the best like group approach from the group like PFS in order to help him to fix Argentina a little bit more, because he did fix it a little bit, and how to distance ourselves or libertarians from his current politics?
First of all, I'd just like to say he didn't fix anything. He just printed a bunch of money. So there was all of this Milei miracle was a complete product of press releases. He devalued the currency and kept printing money, and he thought he could maybe get away with it. I don't even think that you need to go that far, because there are a lot of people that are making a lot of money from the way that things are run. So I don't really believe that honest advice here is very welcome. He knows what he wants. There's a lot of money riding on continuing this shitcoin scam. So I think that's the first thing. And yeah, the way how to talk about how to reduce the damages, to keep talking about him and calling him a scammer, so that we may hopefully not be associated with him for a very long time.
I mean, one remark on this, making compromises and so forth. First of all, as far as his views on foreign affairs is concerned, he could have just easily said, I shut my mouth about that. I don't say nothing about it. He didn't. That indicates, of course, there is something fishy about that guy. Now, yes, in life you might have to make compromises, but the interesting thing, my impression is that the main advisors that he has, or to the extent that they do advise him, in Spain, have been corrupted by him in the meantime. One of the main propagandists in Germany, a very promising economist, to a certain extent, he was indirectly also my student, Philip Bagus. Milei put his wife on his payroll, paid her $7,500 a month, and changed the law in Argentina, because there is some sort of center in Madrid that belongs to Argentina. Normally, only an Argentine is allowed to just run this center. The law was changed so that his wife could run this center. And Milei is a person who punishes not just the person who directly criticized him, he also punishes relatives. Yesterday I mentioned that he hailed one particular economist in Argentina as his great advisor and so forth. As soon as this person criticized his currency controls, he not only libeled him and called him an idiot and whatever his terms are, he also dismissed immediately his daughter that had been occupying some important position in the government. In the case of Huerta de Soto, I'm not quite sure what happens there, but he got a big award, the highest award of Argentina that you can get. So these sorts of things, of course, lead to a situation where these people then, even though they know better, are no longer willing to speak out and tell them, look, what you are doing there, this is not right. What you are saying about certain people is simply not right. That guy, for instance, thinks that Rothbard would be very disappointed about me, that having said certain things. I mean, what kind of moron would say something like that? The guy doesn't even speak English. He has read hardly anything that Rothbard wrote. I was his closest student. So how arrogant can you be that you insult me for having said certain things and then claiming Rothbard would certainly disown Hoppe for saying such a thing. So yes, there is corruption going on. You corrupt people with money, you corrupt people with medals and so forth. Just as Milei was also corrupted, then of course by Netanyahu. If you take $1 million from a guy, you're corrupt.
I might add another thing. We Italian libertarians, we thought exactly of your question. How could we come up with an interesting solution? And when we went there in 2024, and through a friend of mine who knows Milei personally and was invited at the Casa Rosada, I gave him a suggestion. Why don't you establish a free zone in Argentina, choose the place, and you make this a libertarian free zone where the non-aggression principle applies and where you make an experiment in a free society, no taxation, libertarian rules. And the idea was, of course, he doesn't have the majority in Congress, he has lots of political compromises, but this would have been very easy because he could have set up very easy, and it wouldn't have been even much. And so he could say, oh, listen, this is my philosophy, the libertarian philosophy. I understand that I have lots of constraints, but here we make a big experiment. And his answer was, no, thank you, I'm not interested. And so this was the first test of the fact that his libertarian ideas that he boasted in TV weren't that serious and weren't that honest. He wasn't really interested. At least this is my interpretation.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me here at the conference. Since we are at the Property and Freedom Society, I want the panel to react to this statement that I have in defense of property and freedom against something that somebody at the panel said regarding the question that was asked before about the Epstein Island. It was said that it was some horrendous things that happened there. Now, I believe indeed, like it was said, that the Epstein Island was of course a giant blackmail operation. But of course blackmail only works when the information that you hold can be used as a threat, that if you would make this information available to the public, that the public indeed finds this something bad. Like, if you would say 200 years ago, you found out that somebody important is a homosexual, you could use it against him. While today it probably is in his favor politically when you find it out and publicize that. Now, my favorite painter, I think the best painter ever, was Peter Paul Rubens, a Flemish painter who had a lot of political influence. His first wife died and he married a second time, and his second wife was at the time of marriage 14 years old, which is completely according to canon law, namely that females can be 14 years old and males 16 years old. Now I believe that a female can at the age of 14 agree with sexual intercourse with anybody that she wishes to have sex with. Now, I think at the Epstein Island there was a mention of only one girl of 14 years old, and all the rest was older than that. Now, I have to say that we at the Property and Freedom Society must say that this person has a right to engage in sexual intercourse with all of these people present. And I don't think that anything horrendous happened. And blackmail, I believe, is also it's immoral, of course, but it is immoral not because it is an infringement on anybody's rights. It is very, it should be allowed under natural law to use to allow somebody to pay you off so that you don't sell the information to another party. And so. We don't like the fact that they used blackmail, just as probably a lot of Europeans didn't like that Jews used usury in order to enrich themselves, and so they were kicked out of many countries. But what happened at Epstein Island, we should all say, was not horrendous at all. And if that would be accepted, then they couldn't even have used it as blackmail, only because we don't live 300 years ago and we live today. Now it is morally outrageous, but 300 years ago, if you would say that you had sex with a 14-year-old girl, it wouldn't be outrageous at all. And I think my great-grandfather and mother got married at the age of 14.
Huh?
Could you repeat
What?
that, please? Sorry to say, I don't agree on anything you said. First of all, what we don't know. There should be an investigation about what happened. But what seems, especially from witnesses who already said what happened there, is not that there was consensual sex on the Epstein Island. It was they forcefully used young girls, and even much younger than girls and boys, much younger than 14 years old, to have non-consenting sex with the people who were there. So there's nothing about consensus there. And if a government uses this information, or some secret organization, some secret service, to blackmail people who participated in these, let's call them sex parties, I think this goes totally against any libertarian principle. I think there on the island, very hideous crimes happened, and there should be an investigation to punish the ones who were responsible. Of course, this I agree with. Blackmail works only until the information isn't out. That's why they don't want the Epstein files to be made public, because once it's out, then the blackmail ends and you cannot exploit this anymore. But, and then last thing, age of consent is a very, very tricky legal question. It can maybe change according to the ages, it can change according to moral and sexual customs. It's a very difficult question that you cannot answer like this. Probably when Rubens married his 14-year-old wife, it was normal and it belonged to the general way of behavior, but I don't know. We cannot know. Still, abuse of a minor, leaving aside how we define a minor, if it's less than 18 years old or less than any age we will decide upon, but there's a clear-cut distinction between a child and a grown-up who can consent to sexual acts. If you abuse of someone who is to be considered a child, you are committing a terrible crime, and you ought to be punished according to rules which have, as Rothbard said, the first aim to restore the victim, and then the rest.
And even if you were right, the point is, like, you will be punished by public opinion sometimes. So even if that would all be consensual and whatever it is, but if the general view of society is those things should not be tolerated, you will be punished by them. You will not be able to run again, even if you go to a libertarian court and say, well, that's okay. That does not mean that the general public thinks like this. Look, you can see, for instance, when it comes to these sorts of things, French people react very differently than Americans, for instance. That French politicians have mistresses. That seems to be perfectly normal. If you don't have one, then French people might look down on you. If you have as an American politician, you cannot have a mistress. That would be considered unacceptable. So it depends also what is the circumstance, what type of morals are generally accepted in your environment, and the blackmail would work just as well, even if you would say, from a libertarian point of view, that would be perfectly all right, but if the general public has a completely different view on this, your punishment will be just as harsh. So you can definitely blackmail people then too, with relying on what the general public thinks about these sorts of things, and their view might be very different from that. But I think with this sexy question, we should end this session, and let us know how you like this type of format. We have already some ideas how we should improve it. If we do that next time or so, but whether the change in format was something that you somehow approve, appreciate, and so forth, let us know. If you don't approve and disliked it, then let us not know. Okay, all right. And with that, we'll leave it for today.